Hello and welcome, my loyal followers, to this episode of Nothing Like a Good Book, and the podcast that features up-and-coming new and experienced authors being given the opportunity to share their fiction or non-fiction masterpiece. It's promoted globally and can be heard on popular podcast platforms across the country, and of course, easily at markbishopmedia.com. My very special guest is Debbie Hartung. Debbie is a San Francisco-based abstract artist and author, and she studied psychology and visual art at the University of San Francisco and, in fact, graduated cum laude in 2004. She's an avid traveler, passionate about the healing powers of the arts, including visual mediums and music and writing. The Factory of Maladies is her literary debut, chronicling her healing crisis on a psychiatric ward. And you can explore her art, by the way. Just take this down. I'll go over it a few times in the show, but it's www.debbiehartungart.com, okay? That's where you can have a good look at her art. And I also put a little bit on her bio on my site. You can look at that as well. Debbie Hartung, the new book reveals the complexities of mental health, trauma, and family dynamics. Heartbreaking, maddening, humorous, and hopeful, the definitive psych ward memoir. An in-depth exploration of the stigma of mental illness and suicide, the danger of cults and family dynamics. Debbie Hartung sheds light on the shortfalls of the mental health care system while she spent 7 days inside a mental health ward after a suicide attempt. Her powerful memoir, The Factory of Maladies, is written with compassion and is maddening, heartbreaking. It is humorous in parts and ultimately hopeful. Originally a series of journal entries, Debbie recalls her recovery and the confusion and fear that came along with it in this very deeply personal story. So, what can I say but welcome, Debbie.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. I'm really excited to be here today.
Well, it's your first cab off the rank, and you've had some terrific critiques that I am going to share. In fact, Juliana J. Bruno, the author of Reasons to Live and the host of I Don't Care About You podcast, says this: poignant, powerful, and necessary. The Factory of Maladies is a must-read for anyone seeking a deeper understanding of mental health. Hartung's bravery in telling such a profound human story offers us all an opportunity for reflection and empathy. Well, that's the first one of many to come. What a book. How do you want to start this interview?
Well, we can begin. How about we begin at the beginning? I can, right? I can share a little bit about what inspired me to share my story, if you think that would work.
Yeah, I was going to say, in what ways does your book, it does destigmatize mental illness, but what on earth got you to the point of, thinking suicide and to end up where you ended up?
Well, that is a very long conversation, which I'm sure we will cover throughout this interview. But in the beginning, my book really, I believe that my book destigmatizes mental illness by showing compassion for my fellow patients and also myself. And I illustrate that patients suffering from a mental illness deserve to be treated with the utmost care, compassion, and kindness, just like any other illness. Mm-hmm. And it was my own treatment and how I saw my fellow patients treated that really inspired me to share my story. And my experience in the psychiatric ward 9 years ago was incredibly traumatic, dehumanizing, and it was a very sad experience on so many levels. And I was really inspired to start my own healing journey after I left. And I was suffering from incredible PTSD from my institutionalization. And I began just writing journal entries just for my own healing, because I was haunted by flashbacks and memories and triggered just almost 24 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And when I began writing, it was really terrifying at first, but then I realized that it was a very powerful healing tool, and it ultimately became my ultimate catharsis.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So, and you did turn the, journal entries into a book, as we're talking about now, The Factory of Maladies. But it was a good idea to start the journal because, a lot of things happened to you, right? In fact,
Yes.
You share the disorientation and the complexities of mental illness, a quest for the healing amidst the chaos of crisis. And John Kelly from the Detroit Free Press says the book is engaging, distinctive, it's expertly written, and very personal. Debbie's account of her time in a psych ward is a deep and humanizing look into the complexities of mental health. It is a call to action for reform of the system, highlighting where the care of patients fell short. So I guess you got a bit to share there. So what say you, Debbie? Do you agree with those critiques?
I do. I really do agree with John's review and with his, his last sentence especially. And while I was on the psychiatric ward, I often felt like I was being treated like a criminal. I woke up on a psych ward and I was committed against my will, and I had no idea how I arrived there. And so the book is my week-long process of uncovering this mystery and unraveling it and piecing together what exactly led me to take my own life. But on the first 3 days, I couldn't even figure out that part. So, and when I awoke, I was sleeping on a very thin, smelly mattress. I had pancake thin pillows. I was in a glacially cold room. It was dark. There was one window with bars on it, and it was dirty.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout the week, the more I became cognizant and was able to talk to my fellow patients, I realized that on a publicly funded psych ward, this was not unusual. And in fact, it was a nice psych ward compared to what some of them were like.
Right. You explain this you open with your first chapter. I awoke to find myself in a beige room, thin blankets, haphazardly covering. You were shivering. The room was freezing. Your teeth were chattering. And you could see your breath in the dim light, when you breathed out. It felt like that there was a sledgehammer in your head. My frontal cortex throbbed and pounded. There was a tingling and dull ache from my neck all the way down to my spine. My jaw was locked and clenched. I shook, perspired. My limbs felt heavy and sore, and I had the vague sense that someone else was in the room with me. So, who was in the room with you?
It was a fellow patient, but I was so out of it, I really didn't know that she was there until hours later. So
you were put there against your will. You awoke up in a psych ward. Talk about a hell of a fright.
Right. Right. Yes. So there's a lot to talk about. So the story behind the story and what I eventually uncover throughout my stay on the psych ward is about 10 years prior to my institutionalization, I became associated with a new age group, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that they had good intentions and they were, seemed like good people looking for some spiritual healing and, a sense of peace and community. And my very trusted family member introduced me to this group, and I had no reason to question her motives or to doubt her. And I did become involved with them. And the more and more I became involved with them, in retrospect, of course,
mm-hmm.
the more I realized it started spiraling from a group dynamic into a cult dynamic. And unfortunately, the leader, or, you could say guru with air quotes, became increasingly greedy, and power hungry. And during this time, he was also acting as my therapist, and he had convinced me that I no longer needed to see a licensed therapist in San Francisco. And he also suggested that I did not need my antidepressants anymore. And I had suffered from major depressive disorder my entire life. But unfortunately, I was in too deep, and I listened and I trusted. And he exploited my weaknesses. And when I spiraled into a major depression and was so low that I wanted to take my own life, he was the person I confided to.
Right. You shared everything, yeah? Opened up to him.
Yes, exactly. And unfortunately, because of my family dynamics and the fact that he knew my relative closely, he was aware that I had received a small inheritance a few years prior. And so, unfortunately, he implied that it was karmic, sort of this depression and my struggles, and had nothing to do with unbalanced brain chemistry, and that it was okay if I committed suicide as long as I left my inheritance to him and changed my will. So I did attempt to take my own life, and the police found me in my apartment, and I was taken to the emergency room and then to the psychiatric ward, but I couldn't remember anything until about 3 days into my stay in the institution.
What was it, do you think, Debbie, that made you vulnerable to the influence of a New Age cult?
Well, I think there's a few factors. The first is that I am an incredibly trusting person, probably to a fault. And I'm an eternal optimist. I like to see the best in people. So I think I was kind of predisposed and a little naive in that respect. The second is that, I had no reason to doubt my aunt. I really trusted her and thought that she had my best intentions. So that was, a huge part of it as well. And the third was that I was just so vulnerable because my brain chemistry was unbalanced, and I seemed to lose my logic and reasoning skills very quickly.
Well, you're not Robinson Crusoe, Debbie. A lot of people have been through traumatic experiences. You're going to help a few who hear this podcast and who listen to your story, and perhaps will even get the book. I mean, Debbie Hartung, she woke up in a psych ward, her memory's fragmented. The book itself is like a diary of your 7-day ordeal, isn't it? It's a raw and visceral journey through the dehumanizing routines and the unsettling encounters within the institution. I mean, it also exposes the role family can play in helping or harming a patient in distress. So during your stay then, you were tormented by your time in your aunt's New Age cult while trying to reach out to those that, wanted to help you, had your best interests in mind. And you share how you bravely reveal the inadequacies of your current mental health system that you went through, that you found in there. And in fact, there's a lot you have to share. I mean, what areas, just touching on them now, what areas of mental health facilities need reform, and what would they look like?
So I think just a concise answer to that question, because that could go on for a while. I think the reform really needs to start in all areas of treatment. So, and that means adequate training for staff. While I was on the psych ward, the staff was clearly undertrained, overworked. They weren't prepared to treat patients in various states of emotional crises. And there was not enough staff members per patient. And also, I think compassionate and kind care is a must. and that people with mental illness really deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, just as any other illness. If you broke your leg falling off a bicycle, you would go to the emergency room. They would probably elevate your leg, give you pain meds, probably, feel really compassionate for you that you went through such an ordeal. And yet, in my experience on a publicly funded ward, it was the complete opposite. It was almost, like I was a criminal. I wasn't allowed outside. There was not a lot of structured activities. So my patients and I just sort of wandered the halls aimlessly.
There wasn't a watch on you or anything, was there, that you weren't allowed outside in case you took off or something? Or
it was a rule for everyone. So yes.
Just keep you locked up. Yeah, keep them in.
Yeah.
You're psyched enough. You need love and warmth and care and understanding, right? It's not as if you were lashing out at anybody or hurting them or punching them or anything,
Right, exactly. Yes, I was just incredibly raw, traumatized, and scared. And I think in that moment, as you mentioned, that's when people need extra compassion, extra care, extra pillows and blankets and, things that are comforting.
The book is called The Factory of Maladies. A strong support system is so important for mental health that Debbie gets across in this book. What perspective does your book offer that others don't, do you think, Debbie?
So I think it's unique in its perspective in that it is a very intense first-person narrative. And yet amidst this, there is also incredible amounts of description. And I've had readers tell me that the way I described the sights and the sounds and the routines of the psychiatric ward made them feel like they were there with me. And also, I think that it has a tone of compassion, which, some stories can not always include. And I was lucky that I was able to come to that point where I was able to have compassion for myself and my fellow patients. And it also has some dark humor, which is unexpected in the beginning. And it also shares some really tender moments of human kindness and human frailty when I interact with my fellow patients.
Was it difficult to publish a book about a very personal time in your life?
Yes, it was very difficult and also very healing at the same time. I'm by nature an incredibly shy and sort of person. And so it was really a challenge to put myself out there in book form and to, give interviews and speak about my experience and also acknowledge the shame and the stigma that I experienced from my suicide attempt. But I really think that the more we talk about it as a society, the less power the stigma will hold. So I'm really hoping that sharing my story will help other people and instill them with a sense of hope.
I think so. I think it will. Well and truly, I do. Another author, Nita Sweeney. She had a very successful book, author of Depression Hates a Moving Target. She says Hartung's raw and real account explores complicated family dynamics and questionable spiritual leadership, while dispelling myths about mental health care. Hartung shows us what this journey feels and looks like from inside. A lot of people wouldn't have a clue, would they? They hear about things, but they don't believe it. And this is a lot of 7-day different journal. It's a journal of writings every day that ended up becoming a book called The Factory of Maladies. 7 days in a San Francisco psych ward. We're not naming the joint, but I wonder how many there are. How did your experience in the psych ward change your views on mental health care?
So it altered them dramatically. I really, in the beginning, before this crisis happened, I thought, yes, mental health care is important. I was lucky. I had a private psychiatrist. I had a stable relationship and a career as a budding painter. And I had a very lucky, easy life. And I sort of took my care for granted in some respects. And after my institutionalization, I realized just how quickly a crisis can happen, how quickly a downward spiral occurs. And it really, shifted my perspective, because now I feel that mental health care and treatment is something that everybody has a right to, and that people should be treated with dignity and respect as well.
Totally. And one of my favorites, Grady Harp, he's the Amazon Top 100 Hall of Fame reviewer. He gave you 5 stars. Few authors have been able to create the visual and auditorial reality of the perceptions and experiences of mentally challenged patients with the skill that Hartung possesses. And he says it's beautifully written, this book, shockingly personal. The Factory of Maladies, it's a must-read. It's an eye-opener for the struggles of mental health and what areas of the system desperately need reform. And you can get the book or further information. Just go to thefactoryofmaladies.com or on Instagram. By the way, where can one buy the book?
You can buy the book on Amazon, bookshop.org, or Barnes & Noble.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, as I mentioned before, check out Debbie's art, Debbie Hartung art, all one word, Debbie Hartung, HARTUNGART.com. You know, when you think about it, you're out there, you're talented, you're a painter, you're an artist, you became an author, but it's been in you, but you became an author by having this experience. I'm not going to say that you were naturally one of these that was going to end up with a breakdown or end up going into a deep depression, but you were from the artistic world, weren't you?
I was, yes. And
why do you think we are burgeoned with this horrible thing?
With depression in general?
Yes.
I really believe that it's a brain chemistry issue. So for me, no matter what I did on the spiritual plane, or, no matter how much meditation I did or exercise, or, all the things that they say boost your dopamine, for me, it was very simply a biochemical issue. So nothing was going to help except proper medication and medical intervention.
Debbie, can you share more about the role that the family dynamics played in your recovery?
So family dynamics were great, and my partner was very helpful and understanding, and as were my parents. And although this was nice, it was actually taking my medication, proper talk therapy, and 2 months of outpatient therapy that I really believe saved my life.
Okay, well, there you go. I mean, you're really saying, perhaps writing this book also, though, impacted your own mental health journey, Debbie.
Oh, yes. Writing the book was healing on so many other levels. And it's inferred in the book, but not said outright, that I actually had a pretty severe brain injury as a result of my suicide attempt. And part of it, you'll notice in the book, is that I have intense neuropathy, and that was just one aspect of the injury. And in the beginning, it was not only difficult emotionally, but physically, because it was really hard for me to actually grip a pen and make my hands and my brain work together. Mm-hmm. And a neurologist I saw said, basically, use it or lose it. Start painting, start writing, right, start moving. Although you feel unstable, you really have to get your neurotransmitters firing and get the signals to communicate again. So it not only, healed me emotionally, but also physically as well.
Oh, it's like learning all over again, isn't it?
Yes, it was.
The Factory of Maladies. It's Debbie Hartung's literary debut. You can buy it now. Did you mention Amazon before, or you didn't?
I did, yes. It is available on Amazon.
Okay.
Yes.
What, if I was to ask you, what message do you hope readers will take away from your memoir?
I really hope that readers feel a sense of hope from my memoir. I know that it's a little intense and perhaps bleak in the beginning, yet I really feel that it shows my experience in overcoming adversity. So I extricated myself from a New Age cult. I overcame a severe brain injury, and I was able to, channel my pain onto paper in a way that healed me on so many levels. And also sharing my story was incredibly challenging. But I feel that, if I was able to overcome these adversities, then others can as well. And that we really can work together to destigmatize mental illness.
So that's really the message in it. And I also get out of it that, never give up. There's hope. There's always, the other side. You'll come through. Have faith. All sorts of cliches there, I guess. But I mean, when you're alone in that very, very, very dark spot, it's all very well to talk about those things, but it's a lonely journey. I mean, boy.
Yes, it was lonely at times, definitely, and frightening and terrifying and all those things I talk about in my book. But I also know so many people have been there and maybe don't really want to talk about it, but I know that it is painful, but you can overcome any adversity with the right help.
And what about your art? You studied psychology and visual art. I mean, the combination's interesting at the University of San Francisco, but you graduated cum laude, 2004. It's a while ago, and you're not silly. What's your real goal? If you could wave the magic wand tomorrow, is it more art or is it more writing, do you think? And if you did write, what would you write about?
Well, I'd love to wave a few wands if possible, and I would continue to paint. I'm lucky enough to have a studio in the garage of my building, so I have a daily practice of painting. So I'd love to continue that journey and just see where my paintings go.
Yeah.
In the beginning of my recovery and right before I attempted suicide, they were, obviously very dark and murky and showed signs, of my emotional life.
Mm-hmm.
And and now they're bright, they're big, they're full
they're beautiful,
of a lot of
very colorful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
they're full of a lot of texture and happiness. So I'd like to continue to share that. And I would love to work on a screenplay of my book. I think could be very successful as a 7 episode installment as a television show or a movie because of the cinematic manner in which it's written.
Mm-hmm.
And also I'd love to write fiction. It's nice to explore my own history. I think I could use a little break from self-reflection and that would be a fun outlet as well.
There you go. So if you were to write more, the topics would be along the lines of what?
I'd like to write. I have short stories that I'm working on now, and they're vignettes about city life. A lot of them deal with female protagonists who have body dysmorphia. I'm interested in that, especially as I've suffered from eating disorders throughout my life. And I also just love a story that makes you laugh, which may not be obvious from my memoir, but I really would like to work in some comedy into my fiction as well.
Interesting. Well, very diverse. You're a very talented lady. I wish you well.
Thank you.
You know, you've come through the absolute pits and to hell and back is a way I could express it. And, you know, you trauma in your life so young and so many different things, but it's a heck of a learning, but a hell of a way to have to learn everything. But I think the book is going to help a lot of people, and it's, you know, you can't go into a book in a 30-minute interview, but from in depth. But I think if you read each day and each chapter, you see how you're growing and how it's building and certain things, you know, you react to, and somebody may take a leaf out of that. Debbie Hartung is the author. It's her first literary debut, and The Factory of Maladies. And you can, by the way, on your website, can one buy the book direct off that?
Yes, you can.
Mm-hmm. Debbie Hartung, okay. DebbieHartungArt.com. And what was the other one? Oh, yeah, just share one more time where Barnes & Noble and where else again?
Bookshop.org and Amazon.
Okay, so Amazon, bookshop.org. Okay, and DebbieHartungArt.com. Fantastic. What's it called, Mark? The Factory of Maladies. That's what it's called, The Factory of Maladies. 7 days on a San Francisco psych ward. Tune in next week. I wish you well, Debbie. It's all the very, very best in the world.
Oh, thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. I really appreciate you having me on your show. Thank you.
Good luck.